Hello, my name is Emma. I'm 20 years old. I'm disabled. I have mental illness. I have had anxiety since I was a very little girl, for as long as I remember. You'll have to excuse my dog, she's in here with me. I decided to make this video today because we're all very aware of what's going on in the US right now around gun violence and around the way we treat people with mental illness, and how suddenly now there's a push for working with the mental health care system because of not wanting to acknowledge that it's not about that, or at least it's not mostly about that. So because of that, I've seen a lot of really harmful language going on social media, on the news. You know, words that are being used to describe somebody who has mental illness, plans for what we should do with people who have mental illness. I mean, coming from, you know, random people who have no idea who they are on Twitter, all the way up to our president. So I wanted to share my experience because I have... Hi, baby. Yes. I have more experience than a lot of people do, because not only do I have mental illness, I mean lots of people have mental illness ranging from very mild to very severe, but I have been hospitalized for it. I have been hospitalized because of my mental illness 3 times. 3 different hospitals, all last year in 2018. All very different experiences. The first 2 hospitals were actually pretty incredible, which I'm sure sounds very weird to say about a psychiatric hospital, but it's true. I mean, given the circumstances, you can't expect perfection, but having doctors who care and nurses who care and a place that you feel safe, those are the kind of things that you can ask for, or that you should be able to expect in a hospital setting when it comes to mental illness. So I'll just walk you through a little bit of the timeline from last year. Before I start talking about the actual details of this, I want to just put out like a massive trigger warning here, because I'm not going to hold back on my story, because I think it's important for there to be experiences told out there that aren't, you know, censored. And not that I think censoring is a bad thing. I really appreciate trigger warnings. One of the things that I have is PTSD, so that's a huge deal for me. But for this instance, I'm going to be talking about suicide. I'm going to be talking about assault. I'm going to be talking about those sorts of things. So take care of yourself, please. So last February, I was hospitalized. It was on what would have been my ex and my 1-year anniversary. We had broken up in September of 2017. So many things contributed to why I hit rock bottom. That was one of them. At the start of February, early February, I tried to kill myself. I'm really glad I didn't succeed. Get over here. Now. Lie down. Lie down. I'm very glad that I did not succeed. I am very grateful to be here today. I am glad that I got scared. I'm glad, you know, that I was able to stop myself, because that takes a lot. I've come to learn that takes a lot of strength to be able to do that, and even if it's just enough to get yourself away from whatever it is you were using to ask for help, that's huge. It's about a little bit over a week after that happened, I decided that I needed to go into the hospital. And so my parents and I went to meet with my therapist. It was like 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday. And then we went into the ER, and the process began. Just as a brief, this isn't the part of the story that I think is really important, but I do want to talk about it as well. When you go in for being suicidal or at risk of harming yourself or somebody else, they put you on what's called a 5150, which is a 72-hour legal hold. So basically you have all your rights stripped away for the next 3 days. Just scary. And after that, you can have the choice of becoming a voluntary patient, I guess discharging. If they don't think you're safe to discharge and you're not willing to be a voluntary patient, they'll put you on what's called a 5250, which is a 2-week legal hold, which is even scarier. So I was put on a 5150. You go through the process. You have to they take away all of your stuff, all of it. I got to keep my underwear. I was lucky. You get given a special hospital gown that doesn't have ties. It has snaps, so you can't hurt yourself with it. You have to stay on a certain bed in the ER where they have like these mirror things set up so that the security guards can watch you all the time. They take your blood, they take a urine sample, and you wait. You wait and you wait and you wait. Eventually, you get transferred to a psychiatric unit. The first time, I got transferred to the one at the hospital that the ER I went to was in. The second time, I didn't. The second time, I got transferred to another hospital about 40 minutes away, which was actually where I had gone for outpatient program after the first hospitalization. So I spent 8 days in the hospital the first time. I spent 8 days in the hospital the second time. The second time was also after being seriously suicidal. I didn't fully attempt, but I was very close, and the thoughts weren't calming down. So now I'm going to take you to the end of July last year, 2018. I had been out of the hospital for 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. I was back at that outpatient program. I went from the hospital to that hospital's outpatient program. So that's where I was. And we had started changing my medication around, and things were going haywire. I was experiencing hypomania for the first time, which did eventually lead to me getting diagnosed with bipolar disorder 2. And it was while I was there at program, during the program day, that I decided I'm not safe. I can't be out of the hospital. I need to go back into the hospital. So silly, entitled me, I guess. That's judgmental, but I thought that they were going to take me back to their hospital, the one that I had just discharged from, the one that was linked to the outpatient program. And this is where the system really started to fail me, because that's not what they did. They called the police, and a police officer came, and I had to wait in one of the consult rooms with one of the nurses. The police officer came, full uniform, gun strapped to his belt, to come evaluate me on whether I needed to go in to be put on a legal hold or not, which felt so unnecessary to me. I mean, I understand that people aren't always willing, but I was, and that was very clear to the nurse, or I'd made it very clear to the nurse, and not once did I ever show a sign of being resistant to getting treatment. So, you know, he was just there, and he was asking questions, and he was just like writing stuff down about me, and it was all I could focus on was the fact that, like, this person could shoot me if they just decided to. They have the ability to. And that's terrifying. When you're somebody who has mental illness, you don't get treated the same way as other people do. You know, the second time I was in the ER, so before the second hospitalization, my urine test came back positive for ecstasy because of one of my antidepressants that I was taking. But do you think that nurses at an ER, when you come in for being suicidal, are going to believe you that you didn't take ecstasy? If you say yes, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. That's a hopeless feeling right there. To know that you cannot say a single thing to convince somebody to believe you. So, I luckily did not have to ride in the police car with this police officer. They did call an ambulance, but they took me to the county psychiatric ER, as opposed to just a regular general ER. And the thing about county facilities is that they're so much worse than other places, because they're county facilities and they have to help everyone, and the people who work there stop caring. You know, they do their job most of the time, but bedside manner doesn't exist anymore. And again, it's just a feeling of being helpless because you can't do anything. So I got to the county ER, the county psychiatric ER, and things just got worse. It was this tiny little place. We sat outside, and I was on the stretcher from the ambulance, and we had to wait, and there were several homeless people hanging around by the door on the outside smoking, and I have lung issues, so being around people who are smoking is very difficult for me. And finally got let in, and it's just, there was a room for the women, there was a room for the men. There were like maybe 8 beds in the women's and 12 beds in the men's, and there were like these hard plastic chairs out in the hallway. There was the nurses station, which is like covered with like bulletproof glass. There's the consult rooms, and there's the other people. And I don't make judgments on anybody else for how their mental illness manifests, but that doesn't mean it's not difficult to cope with how those people are acting towards you. So, for instance, I went and I tried to sleep. I tried to sleep a little bit, and there was this woman in there that was snoring so loud I got a migraine. That's not mental illness related, but it was relevant to me. And then I finally just got up, and I was like, I cannot do this. And I went to the outside hallway, and this woman got up, the one who had been snoring. She threw up in her bed, and she climbed into my bed. I was like, great, no, we're not going back in there. I was there for maybe 3-4 hours, no, maybe longer than that. Oh, it must have been longer than that. 6-7 hours? That's different than 3 or 4. And I had older men trying to get my phone number out of me because they were manic and they were very interested in me. I had a woman, this was the biggest thing that happened there, was a woman had woken up, and I was sitting with this other girl who was there kind of on accident. Her sister had freaked out and called the police, and so she was there until she could see the doctor and get things worked out. And this woman who woke up saw that there was an empty food box at the foot of her bed. You know, it was somebody else's dinner that they had finished, but she thought it was her dinner, and she thought that we had eaten it, and that meant we were enemy number one, and it was her goal to kill us. So for the next hour, I got to listen to this woman screaming just awful, awful things about me, and screaming at the nurses, and screaming at me, and running towards me. And I should mention that my PTSD is around violence and anger and yelling and all that, so that made this just that much harder. And then the other girl got to leave because, like I said, it had a misunderstanding. So then it was just me. And I was just a mess. I was sobbing. I was so scared because I didn't trust that this staff was going to be able to protect me, because they're like, oh, you're fine, we've got you, you're gonna be fine, you're gonna be fine, you're gonna be fine, whatever. I'm like, yeah, when you're standing behind the desk and I'm here and she's there, you actually can't get there in time if she starts attacking me. So, and this woman just kept like charging at me, and I would have to, like, the nurses would like drag me out into the other room to get away from her, and it was just a nightmare. And eventually what happened is they ended up sedating her and putting her in a straitjacket and locking her in a solitary room. And I don't really know how to feel about that, because that's pretty dehumanizing to have that happen. At the same time, I need to be safe too. So eventually, they wanted to keep me there overnight. And I told them, hell no. I was like, you need to get me to a hospital. And the only thing that meant that I wasn't going upstairs to the county psychiatric unit was the fact that I have insurance. And that, again, huge privilege. Because as bad as this hospital that I ended up at was, county hospitals are so much worse. And I know this from having talked to patients all 3 of my hospital stays. So eventually they told me, oh, you're going to this other hospital. So it wasn't the first one that I'd been to, it wasn't the second one that I'd been to, it was a third one. And I didn't know of this hospital, I didn't know anything about this hospital. But I was like, yes, please get me out of here. And I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried, and I was just still crying, and I was just... An environment like that doesn't actually make you less suicidal. It makes you more suicidal. So eventually, the EMTs got there, and I stopped crying. I was so glad that I was getting out of there. And I wish I knew what I was getting into, but I didn't have a choice, so. And the EMTs were really nice. There was the one that sat in the back with me. We were having like this competition to see who could get closer to what my blood pressure and pulse was going to be. I have an autonomic disorder, so my heart rate is like way all over the place, really high, and then dropping and like all that stuff. So I was right, just for the record. So it was a long drive. It was maybe an hour, a little bit over an hour. It was late, 10 o'clock I think, and then we pulled up at the hospital. So up until this point, I'd been allowed to stay in my own clothes, which was fantastic, because, I don't know, I guess the psychiatric ER works a little bit differently than a regular ER does. They're more specialized, so they can, I don't know, they probably let more people leave than a regular ER would. So we eventually got to the building, and you know, most psychiatric hospitals don't look like anything out of the ordinary. They just look like another hospital or a medical center or something. So the difference about this one was that this hospital was only a psychiatric hospital, whereas the other 2 that I had been to had been campuses of a bigger hospital or parts of a bigger hospital or something like that. But this one was entirely a psychiatric hospital. And I was on the gurney, they wheeled me upstairs, got on the elevator, and there was a nurse there waiting for us, and there were the huge locked doors, and the EMTs took my vitals one last time. The lady told me to get off the gurney and unlock the doors and brought me inside. And the door shut, and now I was locked in this hospital. So the next thing that happens didn't happen in the first hospital, did happen in the second one. So they all work a little bit differently. But one of my least favorite parts about the system, well, that's a bit of a stretch maybe, one of the most dehumanizing parts of the system is when you're first being admitted. You go through and you have to talk to, you're in a consult room, you have to talk to the nurse, you have to tell her everything that's gone on, everything bad that's happened in your life. But get ready to tell it to a nurse the next day, a doctor the next day, then a social worker, and like everybody. So who cares if it's hard to relive it? But then you have to completely strip down, completely naked, and they search your whole body for cuts, for wounds, for hidden things, for weapons, for like all of that. And if you do have any cuts, they photograph them. And to just have to stand there completely naked while somebody searches your entire body is pretty... I don't really know what word to use to describe it, but it sucks. So then they gave me some cereal. Cereal is a big thing at this hospital. It's like all I ate for 3 weeks. Well, not quite true, but it's the majority of what I ate. And then she goes through all my belongings. She keeps what I can't have. She gives me what I can have, which included leggings, underpants, and a t-shirt. Couldn't have my sandals because they had the little metal clasp. And then she walked me into my room. So at these places, for the most part, you always have a roommate. The exception is if you have, unless there's like a special reason why you don't. For eating disorder patients, they do not have a roommate because of the body image side of things. And for transgender patients, they do not have a roommate because I guess hospitals can't figure out where to put them, with a man or with a woman, which, whatever. But, so when I got there to my room, I didn't have a roommate. And I was like, oh, this is kind of nice to just fall asleep, because it was like 1 in the morning at this point. So here's where it starts to get worse. I fell asleep. I don't know how much later it was because I didn't have a watch. There were no clocks, but I woke up, and in my room there was a woman at the foot of my bed where all of my papers were, all my intake papers, with all my personal information, everything. And she was going through them, and she was reading them. And I was so disoriented, I was so out of it, I didn't really know, like, I'm like, what the hell is going on? It wasn't a nurse. So this was another patient. And there was a nurse, like, at the door, like, trying to get her out. And I was really disoriented. And I think the nurse finally got her out, and then she was like, go back to sleep. And I was like, what? Okay. And when I woke up the next morning, I wondered if I dreamed it, because there was no mention about it, nothing. But I hadn't dreamed it. This patient was in a psychotic episode, and over the next few days, I would learn that she had decided that I was the enemy. That I had an evil twin sister, but that I was the evil twin sister. You know, whatever her neurons were telling her was going on, I was the bad guy. And she would walk past me, and she would threaten me. She'd be like, you better watch out. It's like, yeah, walk closer to me next time, why don't you? Like, stuff like that. And I was really scared. I didn't know what she was going to do. I obviously didn't feel like the hospital staff were being very supportive of the situation. So it took 3 days of that for me to get transferred to one of the other units. 3 days of her threatening me, of being stuck with that, like, on me all the time. It was while I was on that unit where we met the therapist who comes in and screamed at us about how depression was our fault and we just needed to try harder. Like, he was serious. There was a man who came in and there was a deaf woman who the hospital didn't get her interpreter services for the first 3 days of her stay. Like, not even when she would see the doctor. And what would happen was she would go and she wouldn't know what they were saying and she would be trying to read their lips. She'd be trying to explain. And they would be telling her, oh, like, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. And so she didn't talk the same way that hearing people do. And so she was getting upset, she was panicking, she didn't know what to do, and she would be yelling, and then the doctors would be like, okay, she's really crazy then, which is so wrong. And the other patients hated her. So I speak sign language, I speak American Sign Language, and I think on the second day she was there, she got in one day after me, I went up to her and I signed to her, I was like, do you speak sign language? And she just like started crying and she just lit up, was so happy, and she didn't stop talking to me for the whole rest of my visit there, which was 3 weeks. But, you know, they finally gave her an interpreter for 1 hour a day. 1 hour a day. Trying to stay calm because I know getting riled up about this isn't going to help, but it's really, really infuriating to have these nurses not care, to have my doctor not care, for the doctors not bother to come by on my first full day there until the evening, which meant I had already missed at least 1 dose of my medication, because they won't give you your medication until you're seen by the doctor. Then eventually I got transferred to the downstairs unit, so it goes first, second, third. I was on second to begin with, and it's like in increasing order of severity. So then I was put down on floor 1, on chest unit. And then the CFO started sucking up to me because of what had happened with that woman the first day I was there. And this whole time I'm trying to get transferred to a different hospital because I do not feel safe. And they're like, oh yeah, we don't do transfers. And I'm like, well, how about we do? And, you know, the social workers and the nurses and the doctors, they were lying to me. They were telling me that something was a possibility when it wasn't, or they were telling me something wasn't a possibility when it was. And they just didn't care. And, I mean, the CFO was coming by every day to suck up to me about the fact that they'd screwed up and let a patient in a psychotic break get into my room in the middle of the night. But they didn't want me to sue them, so I don't even know what, I don't really know what more rationale they had behind that, but I don't think they did. So down on this first floor, it was a little bit better. It was a much nicer unit. It was more like the ones that I had been in the first 2 hospital stays. And, you know, I always connect with the other patients. My roommate that I had then was really nice. But I was trapped. And I didn't have any rights. They say you have rights. I have like 3 copies of the your rights as a mental health inpatient patient. And it doesn't matter. They don't care. They just have to give you that because that's the law, but they don't have to actually follow it because who's going and checking on these hospitals, really? Although that's kind of a funny thing because I was there during their once every 5 years state inspection or something, and so I don't know how they passed, and that is a problem. That is a flaw in the system that they managed to pass when they were treating patients so poorly. But then they're like, yay, we don't do this for another 5 years. And it dawned on me that that was them trying to be on their best behavior. And so after that, things got worse. I had my doctor. I told my doctor, I don't feel safe. When I have suicidal thoughts here, I go up to the nurses, I go up to one of the mental health workers, I'm like, I don't feel safe, and here is why. And they're like, okay. And then they turn their back on me. And that was it. And so I told the doctor this. And he was a very authoritarian male figure. And so he had been kind of like controlling the show, not really letting me talk anyway. And he dared me. I use the word dare because that is what he said. To try and kill myself. Because he was 100% sure that I couldn't. So I should go ahead and try. I didn't. But it was tempting. I know I could have proved him wrong. With how little they were caring about people, it wouldn't have been that hard. And, you know, they treated us like we were prisoners, and we were. We got to go down to a cafeteria for meals, but they would like march us down in all of us in our little blue hospital socks, and then have forced outside time after that, and they wouldn't let you go back inside. Didn't matter if you all wanted to go inside. Everybody from your unit, they're like, no. Like, somebody had ended up throwing up in the trash can because they had eaten too much and they really needed to go inside, and the nurse told her no. And then she got yelled at for what it's worth. The whole cafeteria experience was a nightmare because, again, the staff did not care. There were food fights, like people chucking things at other people. There were manic people hitting on me again, harassing me, getting all up in my face. There was a man who would sit across from me in the cafeteria from one of the other units, I think from on the 3rd floor, and touch himself while staring at me while I would be trying to eat. And I brought it up to the nurses, and you know what she told me? She said, he had a traumatic brain injury, it's a coping mechanism, you need to deal with it. You need to deal with this person using me as their fantasy while they touch themselves in the middle of a cafeteria. That makes a lot of sense. And then, you know, there was this other patient that came in. She was really sweet. She was a lot stronger than I was at standing up for herself and for other people, which kind of appreciated having her around. But anytime, you know, she would tell somebody to back off or something, and she would end up getting yelled at because of what she was causing trouble or something like that. So, like I said, very long 3 weeks. I gave up on trying to get transferred. I kind of gave up in the middle on getting any better while I was there. I was started on a new medication by my lovely doctor, which I'm still on today. It's the magic medication. But the worst had not yet happened. Like I said before, they have the units laid out in severity. So on the 1st floor, there's the least acute unit, and there's the adolescent unit, and there's the next acute, and on the top is the most acute. But they were starting people who needed to be on the 3rd floor on the 1st floor, which means yelling, screaming, smashing things, slamming doors. Is it even possible to slam doors? I'm not even sure. There was one day when a man just lost it and he went into a full-blown psychotic hallucination and was screaming and screaming, and they managed to get most of us. They like shoved us into the day room and like locked the door, so then we were just shut in there, so we were safe. Not emotionally safe, especially those of us with PTSD, listening to all that. And the people that they didn't get, people who were still sleeping in their room, he was running into their rooms and he got transferred. But he shouldn't have been on that floor in the first place. And again, it's not about him. It's his mental illness. He cannot control it. And that is not the point. It's that he was not getting the treatment that he needed, and we were not getting the treatment that we needed, and the staff didn't care. So the icing on the cake was probably about a week before, kind of been, maybe like a week and a half in. And my doctor had started treating me even worse. I was in the day room, I was coloring or something, because that's all we do. All you do in there is color and listen to people tell you depression is your fault. I haven't colored since, no joke. And my doctor comes in to meet up with you, because they meet with you every day, supposedly. But he doesn't say, hey Emma, let's meet up. He comes up behind me, sneaks up behind me, and like smacks me on the shoulder, which scared the crap out of me. And I got up and I didn't say anything. I could have said something. I didn't know that I should say something. I don't really know what was going through my head. But the next day, he came into the day room again to meet with me. But this time, he grabbed me by the arm and he dragged me out of the day room, out into the hallway, and screamed at the nurses that I didn't look like I was suicidal, because I was smiling, and you can't smile and be suicidal. Like, it just dragged me across the unit, and I was so scared. And it was decently before visiting. It was pretty close to visiting hours. And, after he left, I went to the nurses and I was a wreck. My doctor had just physically assaulted me. Who wouldn't be a wreck? And I told them I needed a new doctor. And, I filed a complaint, or I tried to, or whatnot. My parents got there and my mom was furious for good reason. And we went back and, they told me I would meet with the patient advocate the next day, and whatever, we'd figure it out. So the next day I met with the patient advocate, and, she asked me all these questions, and, one of the things that I told her was, I was like, I really don't care at this point. I just need a new doctor, and I do not want him to try to talk to me when he comes onto the unit. She was like, definitely, we'll make that happen. She didn't make it happen. Every time he came onto the unit for the rest of my stay there, he would make a point of coming up to me and trying to talk to me. Because that makes sense. Sorry, I'm getting snarky. It's upsetting. So, the rest of my time there was kind of a blur. When so many bad things are happening, it just starts to, your brain starts to, engulf it to like try to keep you safe from having to think about it all the time. I eventually did get transferred to a residential home, which was a breath of fresh air, quite literally. My pupper that we had just adopted, like literally a week before I went into the hospital, got to come visit me at the residential home. The people there were really nice. I had a room with a bathroom door that would close. I could shower with my own shampoo and conditioner. I could wear a bra. That's a luxury. One I didn't think was a luxury, but it is. I mean, after that, things got better. I didn't really get a lot out of the psychotherapy part of residential home, but I felt safe, and it was so relaxing. And I DoorDashed so much ice cream because they let you do that. And we walked to 7-Eleven, and it was comfortable. And my roommate got there the same day as me, and my roommate discharged the same day as me, so that was nice. After that, the next step in my treatment was I went into a dialectical behavior therapy program at the first hospital I'd been inpatient at, and I was there for 5 months, and that was a huge help, and I've been pretty okay since then. I discharged from that in January, but I did end up filing a report with the state medical board against this doctor. That was in December. Just a few weeks ago, I got a letter from them saying, "We got your complaint. We'll start an investigation when we're ready," basically. So, who knows if anything will ever happen about that, but I just don't want him to do that to another person. I hope I made some sort of sense. I wanted to give you kind of like a first-person look at what it's really like in some of those hospitals. There's really good ones, and there's ones that are really like the movies, that they misportray things in, but they're not misportraying it because it is true. And like I was saying about the county hospitals, they don't even have beds. They don't have rooms. You're just in this big, like, warehouse practically, probably with padded walls, and it's like a free-for-all. They just let you in there with everybody, and they don't give you your medication, and they don't always give you toilets. And so people are just walking around, going to the bathroom on the floor because they could care less. No, they couldn't care less about, the fact that you're a human being who should at least have the right to a bed and a toilet and food. I don't really know what can be done. I know that a mental health database is not the way to go, because that's just opening up a whole door for a new level of discrimination. That's like a sex offenders registry for people with mental illness, and it's different, and there's different levels of mental illness, from anxiety to psychosis or schizophrenia, but even those are on the spectrum, and it would just give doctors more power than they already have. More than they should. They would get more power to discriminate. Jobs would be able to discriminate against you. Just housing, insurance, like everybody would you would become ostracized, and that is not the answer. And it terrifies me to think that could be in our future. I mean, I am a human being. I have mental illness. I have physical illness. Mental illness is physical illness. And I'm not less of a worthy person because the neurons in my brain happen to fire in a different way. Just because I'm not neurotypical doesn't mean I need to be put on a list and set apart from society. That's not okay. And just, like I said, the language being used by the government right now, deranged people and crazy people and stuff like that, that's very ableist language. And just to be clear, I am 1000% for reform in the mental health care system, and I think you probably already got that from this video. But it's being talked about so much around gun violence as a way of deflection from the more prominent issues of white supremacy and racism, which I guess is white supremacy, but just the things that come with white supremacy, racism, eugenics, stuff like that. It's to avoid talking about that, let's just start caring about mentally ill people now. You depending on how fast you are at looking at our president's Twitter feed, you get to see different tweets than the people later will, because he tweets things and they get deleted. One of which I was one of the people who got to see it, that he was him saying that everyone with a mental illness should be locked up in an institution. And that just breaks my heart. And I am a worthy human being. And so is every other human being on this earth. And like I said, I don't deserve to be treated less than that because of something about my body I cannot control. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. I know it was long. I hope I didn't sound like a crazy person. I'm sorry. I hope I was making sense. If I wasn't, I still appreciate you taking the time to watch this. And we need to spread awareness about these harsh truths of what people are still experiencing in the mental health system, of how these, proposed policies are detrimental to the future growth of people with mental illness. So I hope, because of that you will consider sharing this video, even just with one person, and maybe they'd share it with another person, just to, put out this is like epidemic sign language. Epidemic is not what I mean, but, the ripple effect, kind of. That was me skipping rocks. So, thank you again for watching this. I am always here if people need to talk, if people have questions. There are no stupid questions. And even if there are, I will not answer them like they're a stupid question, because there are no stupid questions. Making sense, right? I hope you guys all have a good day, and we just have to keep fighting and stay strong in the face of all of this hate going on in our world right now. So